Have you ever wished you could work less, maybe go part-time or PRN? Or maybe you'd like to change jobs and work as a school nurse or work from home? Or start a business or travel more? If finances are keeping you from doing this, you will not want to miss this episode. We're going to talk to you about how to afford the life you want with Kristin Wade, nurse and financial coach. Welcome to the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham. For over 25 years, I've strived to use my nurse credentials to find work that fit my lifestyle. Whether it was raising my 4 children and 3 fur babies, traveling the world, or moving to Mexico and living on the Caribbean Sea. Sometimes I succeeded and sometimes I failed, but I always learned from the experience. Now, I want to help you by sharing what worked and what didn't work. There are so many opportunities out there for nurses today. The Stay at Home Nurse Podcast will inspire and equip you to have a nursing career that is meaningful and supports your lifestyle. Now let's get started. So today we have a special guest, Kristin Wade, and she's going to talk to us about money, finances, and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so I'm Kristin Wade. I'm the owner of Fiscal Bliss Financial Coaching, and I'm also a registered nurse. So I'm thrilled to be here today.
Awesome. So how did you go from registered nurse, and tell me a little bit about what you did as a registered nurse. Where did you work? What did you do?
Yeah, that's a big question because everyone's like, those aren't two things that go together. So they're very curious about what kicked me out of nursing. I graduated in 2014, and I've been a nurse since then, up until last year. I worked only in the newborn ICU. So I hyper specialized, loved my time. I did kind of get burnt out in COVID, but I didn't give up at that point. I said, well, I'll try a new hospital, negotiate my first pay raise. But really what I did in that time was specialize and climb the educational ladder within neonatal nursing.
Awesome. So you really did specialize, work with all those little babies. I'm sure that was rewarding yet challenging, especially in the COVID era. So what made you decide to leave those babies? I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision.
It wasn't. And, I got into nursing when it was truly beautiful. There was still kind of that nurses eating their young, but we were getting over that. There was a lot more teamwork. I felt that there was growth in our profession. More nurses were certifying, more nurses were taking it seriously and moving up to practitioner roles and different things like that. But what happened was the ratios changed. And I went from giving great care to 1 to 2 babies to mediocre care to 3 to 5 in an ICU. Yeah. I expressed my concerns. And the day that my manager told me that staffing was my problem because I didn't pick up overtime was the day I started looking at other careers.
Wow. Well, okay. I want to stop right there because I've always felt this, and not that I've always acted on it, because my generation is that, like, if you can't find anybody else, I'll come in, because you felt like you owed it to your fellow nurses. I don't necessarily I think that that's great if you work in an environment where they're trying, in a hospital where they're trying really, really hard to make sure you have enough staff. It's not great when they take advantage of that. And I'm not saying that every hospital system does, but it's great for us to have each other's back. But the responsibility of safe staffing lies with the hospital. They are responsible to make sure that there is safe staffing, not the floor nurses. And you should not have to work overtime and maybe not give good care or make a mistake because you have. That's not the nurse's responsibility. Okay, so that's my bandwagon.
Yeah, exactly. That was my soapbox too, honestly, because I have my master's in healthcare administration in nursing. So I understand how this stuff works. I get that there isn't always the staff you need to run the patients you have. So even after times being charge nurse and being told directly from admin supervisor, from higher ups, like, well, no one's complained yet, so we're just going to keep going. This is our budget now. And I asked those hard questions, like, how are we hiring? How are we retaining? Are there any retaining bonuses as opposed to just sign-on bonuses? Because we've been here this whole time and we don't see tens of thousands of dollars going towards that effort. And they didn't like that. And so I really felt my care was suffering. And if you asked for help, You seemed weak.
I agree. And that's not the way it should be. It's not the way it should be. And so I agree with you. And I feel like so many of the listeners right now are agreeing. I'm hoping that there are a lot out there that still love their job and are still working in an environment where they can give the great care that they know they can and should give. But one of the reasons I have this podcast is I like to inspire and equip nurses to do what is right for them. And I don't want every nurse to leave, obviously, the profession, or all the good nurses to leave the profession.
We would be in trouble.
We would be in big trouble. And, I have family that needs health care. My mom was in an ICU a couple years ago. She's back there this year. I mean, there's things that happen. And when my family needs good health care, I want to know that there's good nurses out there that are providing it. But I also want to know that the hospitals and the people that are supposed to take care of their staff are doing their job. And that is their job, to take care of their staff. And not just to make the numbers look good and not take care of shareholders, but take care of the patient in the bed in the best way. I love Chick-fil-A's philosophy, which is basically take care of your people and they'll take care of your customers. And that's truly my belief. And I believe if the hospitals and more hospitals work like that and said, hey, let's give our staff everything that they need to succeed, then it would trickle down to those scores that they want to see from the hospital satisfaction scores, and everything would work well. But we can't solve all the hospital's problems, and we can't change the way that they think or the way that they manage. So how did you transition from being an employee? Because it's not something you can just do overnight. You have to have a plan.
No.
And I'd like to hear more about that.
Absolutely. So it is a weird transition. I have the utmost respect for the nurses who are still doing it. And something people ask is like, oh, do you only coach nurses who want to leave? Absolutely not. But money is a tool, right? So you should never be stuck in a toxic environment, even an environment that isn't toxic, but that just doesn't work for you. And so many of my peers were like, well, my credit cards are maxed out. I've got kids, I've got bills, like I'm the breadwinner. So many nurses are the breadwinner of their family. They're stuck on night shift. Maybe they love their unit, but they can't take the pay cut so they can sleep. And that is when I started informally coaching. So I would be with my peers in the break room and it would come up like, hey, I want to go on vacation, but my credit cards are maxed out. Or, oh, I just learned my credit score is 450. Or life happens, an emergency happens. A big one was women were having babies and trying to figure out how the heck they were going to afford to stay home for 12 weeks, let alone then come back to work and pay for childcare. So I would just naturally be chatting with them. And nor was I wasn't an expert at the time, but it was more of a peer-to-peer support. And finally, the nurses were like, why aren't you charging for this? And I was like, oh, I don't think you can charge for this. This isn't a profession. Oh, it was. It sure was. So I coached myself, Deanna. I actually looked at my budget. I thought, all right, if I'm going to make a jump, I need to save a year's worth of expenses. So I could just float. I could, pick up some side jobs and do things, but then I could really give this a shot. So I saved, I budgeted tight. I do what I tell my clients to do. I made some cuts. And then, in that time I had switched jobs because I thought it was just one unit, one organization. I got into a job with a contract, and the contract had some terms that completely bit me in the butt.
Oh, no.
And that is when I knew. I was like, all right, this is what I want to do, is I want to help nurses not get stuck to these hospitals because they have no other way out. So that was the final catalyst. I had the savings. I still was loving the babies, but I was so burnt out. And so last summer I was like, you know what? If I don't jump, I never will. And I haven't looked back.
That's a very encouraging story on many, many levels. We talked right before this, before we started hitting the record button, about how I'm also a budget nerd. And, I wasn't always in the financial situation that I'm in now. I was the single breadwinner in our family of 4 children and 3 fur babies, which they were big. They were, German Shepherds eat a lot. We'll just put it that way. And
yes.
so, I count them into my budget because you got to feed them. And just like you got to feed your kids, and you have to send them to the vet. And so it wasn't easy. It was a choice that we made. And it was also a choice that we didn't want to go into debt. We wanted to live within our means. Not to say that it was always perfect and it was always achievable, but that was still the goal. And that gives you so much freedom. And it gives you freedom to do a couple of the things that you mentioned and a couple more. For nurses that are listening that are not happy where they are, or that are happy but know that one hospital takeover or one manager change could end that happiness, being prepared by living within your means, having a emergency fund, and it gives you the freedom to take maybe a job that's a lower paying job, but it's more fulfilling to you. Like you have heard so many nurses say, well, I would love to do that, but it doesn't pay as well. I'd love to be a school nurse at my child's school. It would fit perfect, but the pay cut is too big. But when you don't bust at the seams, it gives you so many more possibilities. It really, really does for a season. It's not to say that you want to work at that lower paying job your entire career, but maybe you just want to do it while your kids are in grade school. Or maybe you just want to do it for a year or two. So, while you're transitioning, it just gives you so much more freedom. And so that's what I'd like to talk about. What have you noticed with your clients, like the before and after? What changes happen when they get that financial, I guess you want to call it stability, or when they're learning to let they're controlling their money instead of their money controlling them?
You hit the nail on the head. So my favorite moment, and it doesn't happen at the same time for everybody, but is when a client or a friend or family member clicks and they're like, oh, I can afford to do this, this, and that. Like, I can take that trip in 6 months. I can pay off my debts. And they suddenly don't feel like they're under the thumb of their bank, of their paycheck. Like, we're one paycheck away from instability in a lot of households, right? And that is very scary. And even if you don't feel it every day, it's impacting your well-being. If you are stressed about if that paycheck's one day late, or if that credit collector calls you up. So I love that moment. And that moment happened for me. I started a program called YNAB, using a program called YNAB, stands for You Need a Budget. And I did that when I became a nurse because I knew I was going to make more money than I ever had. I was a 21-year-old, been working odd jobs and grocery store jobs. And I was like, I need to budget my stuff because I don't want to spend it all. That lifestyle creep is so real. And then I used it. I loved it. I was saving. But where it really helped me was when I got divorced and became a single mom. And that was 3 years ago. And I really had to take a look at those numbers. And it was me. And with that program and with the lessons I had learned, nothing changed for my daughter. Nothing changed for me. I had to make some sacrifices. I didn't have as big of an emergency fund, but I stayed in my home. I kept my same job. I didn't have to pick up extras. And that was when I really realized I can help people with this because I wasn't completely crushed by this financially. And this is an opportunity I have to serve others that isn't bedside nursing.
So I want to expound on that a little bit. And yes, we're talking about the nursing and the freedom that you can have to move to different jobs. But you hit on something else that was very important. Because you had a budget and because you were able to look at the numbers, there are many men and women that are trapped in relationships and marriages because they don't have a choice. They don't know how they would be able to live without that other person, whether it's because they provide childcare, whether it's because they need their income. And so that, when we talked about the freedom that understanding your money gives you, that's also another freedom, which is to get out of a relationship that isn't in your best interest anymore. And we'll just kind of use those words.
No, exactly. And, not to bash on my ex or anything, but I had those moments where I was like, how am I going to do this? I can't afford this on one income. And I really looked at it. I won't say it's fun. It wasn't easy, but I did it. I pulled myself up and I figured it out. And that is something I can impart on my clients is you can do it too. And then you're not trapped in a job, in a marriage or relationship. And then really life is up to you.
And divorce is never easy. It is never easy. But when you can take that one aspect of it, which is the financial aspect, and make that one not as hard as all the other emotional things that are going on, I think you make it's never easy. And I don't want to use the word easier, but it's one less thing you have to be as consumed with, and that's not eating at you and keeping you up at night.
Exactly. And I've seen it the other way too. Like I've had clients who say, oh, we want to get married, but I have too much debt. And there's just some education that goes into debts, prior to the marriage and incurred during the marriage. And they're like, what? It's not going to affect my partner's credit score. And so there's happy ways to apply this too, where really financial literacy in this country is quite bad. Even with educated, very intelligent professionals, like we have some blind spots and that's okay. We just can't live there and also have everything we want, right? So a lot of my job is education. The other part of it is accountability and handholding so that we can get through this tough phase and then they go off into the world.
So we are both fans of YNAB. Before I heard of you or met you, probably when you were still in middle school, I was using YNAB. And it changed the way I thought about money. Because at that time, we were living paycheck to paycheck, and every time we would get an emergency fund, something would break, and then it was gone. But at least we had the emergency fund, which without it, it would have meant credit card debt, which, again, so there's a couple things I think that we want to talk about. One is like, why is debt not good? Because it almost seems like now, these days, everybody has debt. And so that's something I want to talk about in a minute. But first, I want to talk about YNAB and how using this software is a little bit different than other ways of budgeting. Do you want to explain that?
Yes, I'd love to. So I'm a certified YNAB budget coach, and I went through their training just so that I could fully explain it and help my clients and my peers, because it is different. It is not a tracking system, and it is not a forecasting system like every other budgeting program I've seen before it. So with YNAB, the biggest thing is you can only budget the dollars that you have in your accounts right now. Not future pay. You're not like guessing, oh, I'll get a bonus in a couple months and then I can pay for a trip and pay down my car. Oh no, you have to start with only what you've got. And there are 4 rules to YNAB. So it's really more of a method paired with a beautiful software, as opposed to the other ones, which are some cool software. And then you just got to make it work. Otherwise you feel bad if you slipped up.
And I have to say, using YNAB, I've used other systems before. I've tried a lot of them before this. This was the first one that didn't make me feel bad. And there's one of the rules, which is roll with the punches, which is basically take the money you have now, figure out what you want to do with it, which is rule 1, give every dollar a job. But then it understands that life happens. And so when life happens, you get to make a choice. And so that choice might be, okay, I planned on spending, $50 on eating out this month, but my friend is in town and we want to go to this fancy new restaurant and I'm going to need $100. It doesn't mean you can't do it. What I love about it is it means you just have to make a choice in the moment. Okay, I still only have this much money. Where am I going to take that other $50 from? Is it Christmas fund because I know Christmas is 9 months away and I have time to rebuild that? Is it maybe your vacation budget and you think, okay, I can do without $50 in my vacation budget. So there's so much that it does. And I think one thing I really want to say real quick, and I want you to explain, is budgeting does not mean you cannot spend money. People think if I'm on a budget, I cannot spend money. But budgeting actually means you get to plan what you spend the money on. And just like your calendar, when you look at your calendar, busy people and successful people have calendars that are like every minute is accounted for something. And the same thing with people that are financially independent. Every dollar is categorized for something. So, okay, go ahead. I'm going to let you talk about that since you're
I'm so excited.
Planner.
I'm like chomping at the bit over here because I just love this conversation. So really quick for your listeners, I want to just do like a super quick run through of the rules because they're like, ooh, rules, it sounds restrictive. And then I want to get into how I compare bad budgets to bad diets. So the 4 rules, one is give every dollar a job. And this is where I tend to lose people. They're like, every dollar. And it's really like every penny. Like if you're doing it right, like you have every cent accounted for in your budget. The second one is to embrace your true expenses. So you mentioned you're saving for Christmas. It's only March. 99% of the world is not thinking about saving for the holidays, but it happens every year. Birthdays happen every year. Your car needs maintenance every year, sometimes multiple times. Your sweet pups, your German Shepherds have to go to the vet, and guess what? They want money. So these are true expenses. And when we embrace those and start to save for those, even if we don't know the exact dollar amount, if we just start putting some money away for it, we're not living on the credit card. We're not just hoping we have enough credit limit left to cover if the car breaks down. The third rule is to roll with the punches, which you mentioned. So same thing, your budget should be flexible. So if you overspend in one area, whether it's your choice or not, because we know the mechanics, like they're never the same price, right? You just have to pull that money from somewhere else. Because I budget every year, you guys, I try. I'm like, it was $497 last year, and it's never $497 again. But I just roll that money from somewhere else. Or if I have leftover money, and I'm good to go in that category, I can move that money into getting a manicure or going out for coffee. So it works both ways. It's not just to cover up things you didn't plan for. It's all of that money is still yours. And then the last rule is to age your money. So you really want to be living off of last month's income. And this is where I tend to start with people is that way you have a month of cushion with all of your expenses. So if you were to suddenly lose your job, get in a car accident, I mean, as nurses, we know your life can change dramatically one day to the next. So you want to be living off of older money. So 30 days between that money hitting your account and you spending it. Those are the 4 rules. So now you touched on like bad budgets. I compare it to crash diets. Everyone's tried one. Everyone thinks, okay, I'm never going to go out to eat again. I am never going to get my nails done or see friends or travel. And then my debt will be paid off in 7 years if I do that. That's not going to work. You have got to plan to live your life. You have got to make it flexible because we all know shame does not inspire motivation. Shame makes you shut down and give up. So we really kind of work from a place of, all right, your debt is just a number. It's not a value of who you are. It is not a reflection of bad choices. And instead of making it like, oh, I'm so bad because I overspent on dinner the other night, it's just flexible. And so that is the approach that we have as YNABers and that I take into my coaching. There's my long-winded response for you.
And I love that response because, again, that's one of taking away the guilt and the shame about budgeting is so freeing. It really is. And when you can use this system, these tools for a while, it becomes fun. It's like I get to decide what I get to spend this money on. At first, it's a little frustrating, especially if you have debt, because I don't want to judge whether or not you should have debt. That's actually a personal choice. But when you get your income every month and you didn't already spend that money because you're just delaying the price of something and you still have to pay for it. So when you have absolutely no debt and you get to decide what you want to do with your money and nobody else is making decisions for you, like your student loan isn't making decisions for you, your car payment isn't making decisions for you, all of a sudden you realize that you make a lot more money than you thought you did. And a lot of YNABers will even say all of a sudden they felt rich because once you get that paid off and you have all this money coming in, it's fun to say, okay, I want to put this much into retirement and I want to put this much into vacation and I want to and you kind of know like this is how much I need to survive. This is how much my telephone is and all of those little things, the internet, the house payment, whatever, electric, right. You know how much that is. And then the rest of it, you get to decide what to do with it. But if you give up all those decisions in advance, then it's not quite as fun. So it makes it more fun. It gives you more opportunities. And one of those opportunities was you starting a business. So
yes,
not all of our listeners, some of our listeners just want the flexibility of being able to work wherever they want, maybe not work as much overtime, maybe, go part-time or casual, but others do want to start a business. And one of the things that I teach people that want to start a business is you really have to get your finances, your personal finances, under control. If you can't control your personal finances, you will not be able to control business finances because business finances are a lot more precarious. They're not steady. It's not like this much money is coming in every month, like your paycheck. As long as I go to work, I'm going to get it.
Yeah.
In a business, you could work a lot and not make any money.
Yes.
Or you can work very little and make a lot of money. It's the different types of businesses that there are. But the income and the outflow and just understanding cash flow and how things come in and how they go out and not planning on something coming in, but knowing that you have to still make payroll or you still have to be able to pay for software or your website or whatever it is, whether or not you have a client. So again, if you can manage your personal finances, you are much more likely to be able to handle your business finances. And have you seen that to be true? I know you also coach people on business also, so I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So what's interesting is no matter what business you start, like maybe you want a nursing business, maybe you're going to open your own skilled nursing facility, or whether it's completely different like mine, when you start out, your finances are the business finances. Like, unless you can secure a great loan, you are really funding your business. So I set aside mine, and everyone's like, how do you know how much you need to live? Oh, I think I need like $3,000 a month. This really helps you say, okay, I need $2,987 each month to pay all my bills. From that information, I built out a year just to survive without getting any income. And then I said, okay, I probably need, this was more of a guess, to be honest with you. I probably need this much for business cards, filing an LLC, for starting my website. And then it can get really overwhelming because everyone wants to sell you their bookkeeping service and their marketing. And that is where you really can look at the numbers and say, I can't afford a huge marketing agency right now. I got some quotes last week and they made me turn pale because they were so expensive, but maybe in the future. So I really took my personal finances and the lessons I had learned from there and turned that into my business budget. And I have a YNAB budget for my business. So when it's time to renew my PO box, when it's time to renew my Zoom account, I've got the money in my business account and I just applied the same principles. So it's the same no matter what your endeavor is. And the biggest thing I come across is I have variable pay. Maybe I'm a freelancer, or like a big push in nursing is freelance writing right now. It's where you could work on the side, but that's gig based, right? So you're not getting every month X number of dollars. Programs like this are perfect for variable income because you can really prioritize and sort of triage that money and see what needs to happen before you get paid again.
I absolutely agree. And I also have a separate YNAB budget for my business. And I
love it.
Yes. Well, when you start making money in your business and we have a separate business bank account. And when you see that money in there and you think, oh, that's all my money. But you forget, oh, we owe licensing fees of this amount, and we owe an instructor this amount for teaching this course, and we owe royalty fees for this person who wrote a book that we published. So it's really not all of your money. And that was one of the mistakes that I would make. And I would open up the account and say, oh, we're good. We can go ahead and get that marketing thing because look at all the money we have in our bank. But then you don't realize, no, we pay licensing fees quarterly, and that money is already allocated for that. So now I do it completely different. And every month when the money comes in, I say, okay, how much of this money came in for this product that we have to pay a licensing fee on? And it goes automatically assigned to that. And that way you look at your budget categories as far as how much money do I have, instead of looking at your bank account, which I think I've told this story before on here about why you should not use your bank account to decide how much money you have. And this was a few years ago, so it was probably around 2014 or 2015. And I was, at the time, I don't know if it still is, Caesar's Pizza was $5. And I had had a long day. I worked really long, took the kids to soccer practice. I was tired. I didn't want to go home and make dinner. So I'm like, I want to see if maybe I can just go to Little Caesars and get a pizza. And I'll use my debit card because we weren't using credit cards at the time. And I looked at my bank account and I saw how much was in there, and it was like $11. And I'm like, we're good to go. We can get 2 Little Caesars pizzas. So we went through the drive-through at Little Caesars. We pick up our pizzas. We get home, and the next day I'm overdrawn because there was something that hadn't cleared yet. And so now those $10 pizzas were costing more like $40 once you added the $30 overdraft fees. So that's when I got YNAB, because I'm like, I cannot look at, I started Googling budgets and I found YNAB because it was like, this is not something that I can continue to do. And it was probably around 2011 or 2012. I'm trying to think about it now because my kids were much younger. And it was a terrible, extremely deflated feeling to think I can't even buy my kids Little Caesars pizza because that's how bad my finances are. And no, we only had a mortgage and maybe a car payment. We thought, because that's how everybody else lives, that we were doing okay, and we were paycheck to paycheck like everybody else, and the paycheck was coming in 2 days, and we were good to go. But that was a very deflating, it was a terrible moment, and it was enough that got me to decide that I needed to do something different. I couldn't keep doing what I was doing and expecting different results. I needed to do something different, and that's when I found YNAB.
We've all had moments like that, right? Whether you're just embarrassed in the checkout line or you're checking your statement. You said, oh, I thought I had $400 in here, and it's like $3. And everyone has their reason why and their embarrassments and their shame around it. For example, my business account has, let's just say, $1,000 in it. I have no room in that budget to go buy anything for my business. And people are like, you've got money in the account. But none of it is budgeted for a business lunch or more supplies for my office because it's all got jobs. Rule 1, every dollar is assigned to the bills I have coming, even if they're not due yet. So like my PO box is August. So that's a true expense, right? Because it's going to be a couple $100 in August. And I better have that money in there. Otherwise I'll overdraft. And then all those fees and the shame come right back. So really being flexible and accepting like, okay, this is my situation now. It does not have to be my situation forever.
And so, we've talked a lot of the depressing reasons why you need a budget.
Right.
Let's kind of like transform this to a more positive about what being on a budget can mean for you and what your life can look like when not the first day, not the day you start your budget, maybe not even the first week or the first month, or for some people, not even the first year. But when done successfully, tell me what it looks like for yourself and your clients once the light bulb goes off, everything starts working, they work the program, they do what they need to do. What does that life look like?
Yeah, it's so funny. Your listeners are probably like, this is really sad, but it's just the reality. With a budget, that's a bad word for a lot of people. They think of it as restriction and punishment, and you can't live the life you want to live. It's the exact opposite. So realizing once you have the awareness of this is where my debts are, this is where my expenses are, this is how much I'm paying for car insurance, whatever it may be. And they've got a couple weeks under their belt of figuring out how to assign their paychecks and prioritize their dollars. Something really beautiful happens. And it's called the YNAB magic. This is not a me thing, but this happens when all of a sudden you've got some extra money in that ready to assign category. And you're like, oh, all my bills are covered. Next month's bills are covered. I can actually play with this and I can save it, spend it, and you can guilt-free spend the money because you've assigned it. So you may have $100 in your clothing budget. You go to the mall without a care in the world, keeping in mind, okay, I've got $100. And it's a freedom that you can't quite explain to people until they experience it because it seems too good to be true, especially when you were raised in a household where spending was like guilt-induced or to cope with a stressful day. So it shifts money as opposed to like being a neat thing you have on your computer that you look at and then, oh, it didn't work, I'll give it up. This is a whole shift in your money mindset. And so I love when I see people get that far and then they're like, Kristin, I went shopping and I was under budget, but I bought everything I wanted. And now I have money I can roll over and go eat lunch. Like that is the stuff I live for when I help people get these set up.
Yes. And I have to say, when I look back at where I was before, I never thought that I could get out of that hole. You get yourself into this hole and this rut. Just last October, I decided that I wanted to hike the Grand Canyon. Well, I decided a year before, but it took me a while to get trained and to get ready to do that. And when it's not an easy thing to do. Like the lodges that you can stay at and stuff, they sell out really quickly. So it's like you have to be ready. And again, I have not had any debt for several years. Since before I moved, right after I moved to Mexico, I paid off my student loan that I had on my daughter, the Parent Plus loan, and I decided I was never, ever going into debt again. Now, I understand things happen, and I know never to say never because God has a sense of humor, and he says, watch this. But I do not plan on going into debt again. And when I saw that there was an opening for a couple nights and I would be able to do that Grand Canyon trip, I was able to just buy it, just get it. I didn't have to worry because I had been saving money, knowing that this is something that I wanted to do in my vacation fund, and I just did it. And when my partner, Abby, he was like, you're spending that much money? And I'm like, yeah, it's in my budget. In fact, I have more than that in my budget, so I'm good. It's in my budget for vacation, and I'm good to go. And it also covered all the equipment that I was going to need and everything. Like I didn't have hiking boots, and I didn't have, a backpack, and I didn't have the kangaroo that, gives you the water through the straw thing so you don't die off, from dehydration. And, I was able to do all of that without even one little worry. And that might not be your thing, but you have something. You have something you want to do. Maybe it's a trip to Disney to take your kids to Disney World, or maybe it's a cruise, or maybe it's to buy a car and you want to pay cash for your kid's first car and not have to go into debt when they want it. There's so many things that you want, and it really helps you to prioritize. And then when you can do that and you can just be like, yep, the money's there. The money's there. I don't have to worry about it. It's already out. There is no guilt whatsoever when you spend money that you've already budgeted and saved for, and that's what it's for. So you don't feel guilty when you buy the clothes. You don't feel guilty when you buy the latte at Starbucks and spend $5 on a drink, because you already said you were going to do that, and it fits within your budget, and you can afford it. So yeah, it's a very, I would kind of want to switch over to this is what your life looks like when you've done it successfully. And it's not, YNAB is very easy. I think amongst all the different budgeting softwares out there, it is extremely easy, but there is a learning curve. And because it's different, and you have to learn how to think differently. So how do you help people that are like, okay, I don't want to be trapped in this job forever, or I want to be able to make sure that my kid can go to whatever college they want to go to, or for whatever reason, whatever their why is, they're sitting there thinking right now, like, oh my gosh, I need this. I need to get my finances in order. How do you help them? What do you do?
Yeah, so YNAB has a wealth of information, tons of videos, lots of articles. They're really support heavy. They even have support that is amazing. I've reached out to them a few times and they're quick. But when you are busy, like I cater to busy people, right? They don't want to spend hours learning something. They give up quickly because life happens, right? You're a busy nurse. You've got stuff to do. You have kids, you have life. So as a certified YNAB coach, I sort of am that like gap between, okay, I understand this, but not this. And there's not a support article for me, so it's that real one-on-one support. I help teach the rules and the method. I help make sure that you've got a budget set up that works for you. Every single one of my clients looks different. And I couldn't even tell you like how many options there are. You can set it up in so many different ways. Another thing I do is I can extend your free trial to 94 days instead of 34, because we all know we don't want to spend our money on something that we don't love. So I extend your trial. We try it for a little over 3 months. We get some good paychecks in, and then you can choose to subscribe. And I just want to be transparent. It's $15 a month monthly, or $100 a year if you pay annually. So I have everyone build it in their budget to pay for that $100 to save some money. And so by the time 3 months is up, they can purchase a year without even blinking. We do a lot of things such as play with their debts, like look at how long it will take to pay down that credit card bill or that new car they just got. And another big thing is we make a line for an emergency fund, and we figure out the dollar amount they need for 1 month of expenses and go from there. So it's a lot, but at the end of the day, it's the level of accountability you won't get from a bank, and you won't get from YNAB as much as they want to help their users.
Right. And YNAB is great, and they do have a lot of support. So if you absolutely I always think of time and money as these things where if you have more time, then you may not need to spend as much money because you can go figure it out for yourself. But I look at the time I spend now as what could I be doing instead? So if let's say something took me 4 hours, and back in my hospital days when I was working at the hospital, I had jobs that I could work a 4-hour shift. I could do 4 hours of overtime. And it's like, okay, if I can work 4 hours of overtime and make X amount of dollars in the time and then pay somebody else to teach me this and still have time left over and money left over, that's a win-win. So that's kind of how I look at it as far as busy people. Even with my business now, there are times where, yes, when I started my business, I learned how to do everything myself. I learned how to do, everything that you need to do in a business, which we won't go into that here. That's a whole nother podcast. But everything I needed
Yes.
to do, I had to go find videos, find YouTube videos, like when I wanted to start this podcast, I said, that's enough. I'm now a busy CEO of a company. I don't have time to go out there and investigate it. And I bought a course that walked me through step by step. Now, that's easy for a podcast because everybody has to do the same things. But when you're talking about something like a budget,
Right.
where you have everybody has a different amount of debt. Some people have no debt. Some people have 2 incomes coming in. Some have 1. Some are behind in their bills. Some are ahead in their bills, and they don't know what to do with their money that's left over. So for something like that, you kind of need more of a coach than, sometimes you can do a course, but this you need a coach. So I would just, my kind of like winding down, and I would like to ask you before we leave if there's anything else that you'd like to talk about that we missed, but I would like for anybody who is even thinking that they need this to reach out to Kristin, because I can't tell you what a life-transforming change this was for me to get my finances in order. And as we sit right now, we are in the process of selling everything we have, which is not much because we've already done this once we moved to Mexico. So now we have we have like pots and pans instead of houses and big things. So we have like my kayak and things like that. But we're going to be doing the nomad thing where we're really not going to have a home base, and we're going to just travel the world. We're going to go to Europe. We're going to go to Asia. And we can do that because we have a budget. And because we know how much we can spend, how much is coming in, how much we can expect to come in, but we'll live much less than that. And then if 1 month we don't spend as much as we think, that's great, because maybe we can go a little bit higher class next month. So that's just one example of what you can do and the things that you can do when you have this under control. And I feel like I could talk forever on this, but I didn't want to talk by myself about this. Like, yes. I have been thinking like this podcast needs to be out there, but I don't know. Like, I didn't feel like I was the person. So when Kristin reached out to me, I was like, yes, because I would like to shout it from the rooftops. Like, everybody needs this because it puts you in a different place. And all I can say is you need to have control of your money, because then you will have control of your life. You will have control of the choices that you make as far as your career, as far as your vacations, as far as where your children will go to school. It's not going to suddenly, money will not appear out of thin air, but you will be in control and you'll get to decide, do we do this with our money, or do we do that with your money? And what I find is when you don't make that decision beforehand, when the money first gets into your hands, life decides for you. And then before you know it, you didn't do the things you wanted to do because you didn't plan it. Just like on your calendar, I put in, when my family comes down here, that goes in first. When I go on vacation, that goes in first. And then I plan my work around that because I decided that that's more important to me. So when you do that with your money and you decide what's the most important, and then you have that left over. Okay, I'm sorry, that was a big ramble, but I can't explain how excited I am to have Kristin on here, somebody who is actually certified in this and not just a fan.
I can't stop smiling. I know no one can see me right now, but I'm over here grinning because that is why I'm doing what I'm doing. In the hospital, I made a big impact on families, but I was killing myself to do it. I'd have days where I wouldn't pee. I'd have days where I wouldn't eat. And then I'd go home and snap at my toddler. And I was like, this is not for me. And I'm keeping my nursing license and I'm keeping the door open to nursing. But this is my passion right now, is freedom. And I'm not giving it to you. I'm not giving away money, right? I am helping you find it for yourself, which is the most inspiring thing in my life right now. And that's why I chose the name Fiscal Bliss. because it makes no sense to people. They're like, money is stressful. Money is scary. It's powerful. And I like to change the narrative so you can really take it in your hands. I think you really covered everything. I can help with all sorts of things. So every client has completely different values, completely different needs, different income. And we just sit down. I start everyone with a free consult. So if you think, hey, I might need a little bit of coaching, reach out to me. The information will be in the podcast notes, I'm sure. And I would just love to get to know you. And then we can see if we're a good fit for each other. I also focus on maternity leave planning. If you just have like an event in your life that you need to plan for, to pay for, we do all sorts of stuff over here. So it is a great time. And I have loved this conversation. It could probably be a 4-hour podcast if I let.
That's what I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, wow, it's gone by in just a few minutes, because it's something that is so exciting and passionate, and it's so transformative. And, one of the goals of this podcast is we want nurses to be happy. We want them to be well balanced. We don't want them to be stressed. And whether that means and the first step in that is having the freedom to do what you need to do. And the way to get that freedom for most nurses is financially. You have to be financial, because let's face it, we're working because we need the money. And so Let's get that money to work for us on what we want it to work for, and not on just life, because we're stressed, we're overworked, and we make decisions. We make bad decisions when we don't plan. So let's plan. Yes. Let's plan. And in 5 years from now, you can look back and have a transformed life. I like to look at the path like there's 2 roads you can go down. One is to just keep doing what you're doing. And when you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get the same results. Or you can say, no, I'm going to take this side path and I'm going to take control. And then that gives you so many more opportunities. Okay, so where can people find you? Where can they find you if they decided, yes, this is for me? First of all, do it right now before you forget, because life happens. Yes. So how are they going to reach out to you, Kristin?
So my website is www.fiscal-bliss.com. From there, you can find my Instagram, my Facebook, my LinkedIn, but the website's the main hub where you can sort of see the different things I offer and book a consultation with me, because I love getting in front of people. That's how we can really see what is going on and get a handle on things and decide if it's right for you.
Awesome. And we will have a link to that in the show notes. So if you're listening to this on Apple, all you have to do is kind of scroll up a little bit and see the show notes and click on the link, and that'll take you right to Kristin's website. Okay. And I would love to hear, maybe shoot me an email, or we have a Facebook group for this podcast, the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. And I would love to hear if somebody takes Kristin up on this offer, to hear how it changed their lives. Because it's one thing for me to talk about what it's done for me, but I want to hear others. I want to hear those stories. I love talking about this, and maybe we'll even have them on the show and they can tell everybody what happened and how it changed their lives. Okay, any final thoughts, or are we just going to go ahead and end it here?
I think we will go ahead and end it. This is so great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. Okay, so guys, don't forget, check out her website. Get that free consultation. Again, I get nothing for this other than the satisfaction of knowing that I've helped others to be able to make the choices they want, because so many have reached out to me and said, I would love to start a business, but I'm not in the financial place to do it. Or I would love to get a work from home job or be a nurse at my child's school, but I can't afford it. And this is how I can help you do that, by giving you this resource to talk to Kristin and see how she can help you to get those finances doing what you want them to do. Okay, guys, another great episode. And thank you, Kristin, so much for joining us today and teaching everybody about the importance of taking control of your money.
Thank you.
If you know someone who would benefit from listening to this podcast episode, or this podcast in general, please share it with them. Don't forget to reach out to Kristin at fiscal-bliss.com. Until next time, adios from beautiful Puerto Aventuras, Mexico.